So plastic waste management amendment rules. So the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change came up with this notification. What was this notification? This notification was specifically with respect to prohibiting single-use plastic. Single-use plastic. Yeah. Now, any idea who in India is really passionate about banning of single-use plastic? It's a very vague question, like UPSC question. You'll say, I am also passionate. Yeah, you are. But I'm talking of some very important person who is passionate about banning of the single-use plastic. Any guess? Exactly, it's our Prime Minister. He is kind of the poster boy is not the right word. He is kind of the messiah. He is the brand ambassador. That's the right word. He is the brand ambassador for single-use plastic. Are you aware that our Prime Minister? I'm not sure if he's talking now so frequently, but till recently he had this program called Mann Ki Baat. Yeah, wherein he talks to the people of India and takes up the theme. So I have heard him talk or being quoted as having talked on multiple occasions. So he's a big champion of single-use plastic. Okay, so that is why this comes. That is why this further rules have come. Because if you remember in the last class, we had already talked of plastic waste management rules 2016. Then comes your 2018, and now we are saying 2021. So this is interesting. Yeah. So this is a third amendment. Why? Because none other than the Prime Minister himself is personally invested in this single-use plastic. Okay. So that's there. And what India has done, because the Prime Minister had kind of personally invested in it, India also committed in the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2019 that we will, do this. Then obviously it becomes a, they say in Hindi, Izzat ka sawal. You said that in front of everyone, so you better come back and implement it as soon as possible. And the government followed up. Now, what is single-use plastic? Okay, we invariably we would be using them. So in order to just give you a sense of what a single-use plastic. See, one single-use plastic is very simple. You go to a roadside fruit vendor and just take some 6 banana, and you say you don't have a bag. They're generally kind enough to give you a plastic bag sometimes. It is so thin. Yeah, you will sometimes even feel whether the bag can hold the weight of a banana, but it does. And you take it home. Most probably, you are not going to store that plastic, even if it is not so, because it is so thin, so small, it appears as if it has just been suited for you to buy 6 bananas. Okay, so what will you do? One way or the other, that plastic gets into your dustbin. Okay. Now, so that is one example of single-use plastic. That plastic's usage was just for 10 minutes to bring the banana from the shopkeeper to my house, after which it has gone into the dustbin. That is a single-use plastic. That's one end. Now let me, step up a little bit. I go to a very fanciful mall. Okay, I go to which coffee shop do we like? Let's say Cafe Coffee Day. I go to Cafe Coffee Day, and they give a cup which is kind of recyclable material, paper material. But the stirrer, you have seen the stirrer? Have you seen a stirrer? Very, very thin and it is hollow. Okay, the stirrer is made up of plastic. So that's an example of single-use plastic. Candy stick. If ever you have purchased a lollipop for the kids, the candy stick, that's a single-use plastic. Earbuds. All these plastic plates, spoon cups, wrapping material, all of these are single-use plastic. What is common in majority of the single-use plastic is the constituent. So this is something which I would want you to remember. Not that it is definitely going to come to prelims, but it's generally, underlying things which are important. Yeah, what is single-use plastic actually made up of? It is made up of polystyrene or expanded polystyrene. These two terms you can remember. Okay. Now, one thing is to ban, okay, single-use plastic. Now, second, going back to my example of me purchasing 6 banana and bringing them in a very, very thin polythene cover. That is one example. And I gave you the second example of me going to the coffee shop and then having a stirrer. Most probably the stirrer is put into the dustbin. Third, let's say I go to shopping and we purchase some, let's say, sari or clothing. If you have seen now, all the sari shops in Chennai, I mean, Chennai is famous for sari in case you're not aware. So all the sari shops in Chennai, they have started giving a different kind of a bag, quite heavy jute bag kind of thing. But earlier they used to give a plastic bag, but it used to be very thick plastic bag. Means you can carry comfortably some 2 kgs of material in those plastic bags. Okay. Now I have also observed in my house, my mom when she takes those plastic bags, we have come home, there was sari has been kept in the almirah. The plastic bag does not go into the dustbin. I'm sure you would have observed this in your family also. Usually the plastic bag goes to a drawer which has a lot of similar plastic bags. Now what is happening here? In one case, I did not even think twice to put a small plastic bag into the dustbin. On the other hand, even before these plastic rules came, I'm talking of 10 years before. Okay, my mother, what she used to do, she used to keep this plastic bag inside the shelf or inside the drawer. She did not at that point know that plastic is causing environmental damage. She was just being smart of trying to unnecessarily save expenditure of buying a separate bag. So what we used to do, we used to use the same plastic bag to go to shop X, shop Y, shop A, shop B, purchase 10 different things. What was fundamentally different between both the plastics? Someone can answer me. That is the plastic that I purchased from the food dealer versus the plastic bag that my mom got from the clothes shop. What was fundamentally different? Any idea? Very good, Vaibhav. Quality is correct, Sheta, but the more accurate answer is thickness. Quality is good, therefore you felt like keeping. That is true. It has a nice brand and all that. But the actual point is thickness. Now, what is happening here, guys? By just increasing the thickness of the plastic bag, you are somewhat creating a behavioral change in the consumer who thinks, why to throw this? This looks like a good bag, yeah. And as Indians, I think one good thing about Indians is we generally tend to save anything. Do you agree? Sometimes it can be counterproductive. I'll speak about the saving ability when we talk about e-waste also, how that can be counterproductive. But in plastics, that's a very, very useful thing. What you've done, you kept the plastic wide because you try to stretch it, you see that it's not transparent, it is thick, and therefore you feel that you can reuse it. It is this mentality of Indians that this law also, I feel so. I mean, the law doesn't explicitly state that, but I believe that is the reason why they are planning to increase the thickness from 50 micron to 70 micron. So this is by September 22, yeah, 30th September 2022, and by 120 micron by next year. Okay, so what is happening? All those applications where single-use plastics were being given, the manufacturer himself increases the thickness. This may have an impact on cost, by the way, but somewhere the cost will get passed on to the consumer only. So the shopkeeper lady who was selling 6 bananas for 30 rupees, she'll charge 35 rupees, including for the cover, and I may not even realize it. But at the end of the day, what we are doing, because I purchased the cover and I find, yeah, this cover looks good, yeah. So I might as well put it in my bags wala cupboard. Okay. So that's about the plastic waste management rule. But we are still sticking with plastic waste. We are not yet done with plastic waste. There are some data, it really helps. I was personally happy when I got to know that 60% of plastic in India is recycled here. I think that's quite a good thing. 60% is being recycled. Not other sectors, none of the other sectors that I know, for example, e-waste or the other sectors, so municipal solid waste, they come nowhere close to this. So to that extent, the recycling of plastic is still better than the recycling rate of some of the other polluting materials. The 2016 amendment rule itself brought this principle of extended producer responsibility. I think I touched on extended producer responsibility. Now, the 2021 amendment, what it says is, it says so many things are included. Yeah, all these things are included under single-use plastic. There is one category of plastics called as plastic packaging waste. Plastic packaging waste. So when you are purchasing something, between the outer cover and the inner one, you will have some plastic waste. There will be thermocol, of course. Thermocol also is, by the way, classified as plastic here because here I have mentioned thermocol. That's also included under plastic. The technical name is polystyrene. So there is thermocol, and there is also some packing material. You would have seen. Have you seen this? What do I call? I don't know the name, but my daughter, she keeps popping it. It makes a sound. This bubble kind of a thing. You just turn it, it makes a sound. So that's also plastic. That is not getting covered. That is also single-use plastic, by the way, because it comes to use it only for packaging once more. That is also single-use plastic, but that has not been brought under the purview of the single-use plastic. But in order to compensate for it, what the government says, that has been brought under the ambit of extended producer responsibility. And in this, the law says it is not just the producer, it is the producer, as in the manufacturer, the importer, and the brand owner. All three are responsible. So the responsibility is not at the producer alone. If the producer was in a different state or a different country, so that it's a little complicated. How do you make it liable for a person who's outside India? But at least that's what the law says. It's on the producer, the importer, and the brand owner. If the brand owner is a software drink manufacturer, he and the person who imported the plastic for him and the person who produced the plastic for him all have been brought under the purview of extended producer responsibility. And these have been given a legal force. So earlier there was extended producer responsibility, but this time they have been given a legal force, penalty in case of non-compliance. Okay. So the extended producer responsibility concept, I have kind of shown it here, which is self-explanatory. So you start with the manufacturing guide, the retailer sells the product, the consumer buys and uses the product, then it is used for recycling. Yeah. So in this case, once it is recycled, the producer uses the recycled material to manufacture products. So that's on the Plastic Waste Management Amendment Rules 2021, in which we looked at the concept of single-use plastic. Yeah, one important thing, the Central Pollution Control Board is a nodal agency. Even while we talk about CPCB, I told that while it focuses primarily on air and water, it also focuses on plastic, e-waste, and some of the other, even municipal solid waste also it comes under CPCB, where it does in conjunction with the what do you call them, with the municipal bodies, but it is at a central level, it is a nodal agency even for coordinating action points related to municipal solid waste. Okay. 9 reasons to refuse single-use plastic. I found this picture to be good. So sometimes it's easy for you to look at the picture and remember it. Made from fossil fuels, plastics means it's an output of petrochemical refining, hence made from fossil fuels, and therefore huge carbon footprint. Point number 2 will still be there for hundreds of years because they are non-biodegradable. Only a tiny percentage is recycled. So in this case, they are referring to tiny percentage of single-use plastic. The 60% is for overall plastic. So it so happens that maybe less than 5% of single-use plastic is recycled. But overall, the plastic recycling is very good, which is at 60%. Leaches toxin into food and drinks because plastic, when it goes into the landfill, it goes into the groundwater and it contaminates the groundwater. Causes hormonal disruption and cancer. That's also a known fact. Pollutes our ocean. This we have discussed a lot in marine pollution. Kills marine animals and birds. This we have seen. Entanglement and ingestion. Enters our food chain. This also we have seen in the form of biomagnification. Okay. So if you connect what we have studied, I think all the 9 points, at least 5-6 points, you'll be able to remember if you have to really write something about plastic pollution. So government initiatives to address single-use plastic. So there is a government initiative for almost everything in India. It's good, but for a civil service aspirant, it means learning a lot of things. So I really didn't find a lot of things to explain. So I put it under self-study. You may be thinking this guy is too smart. Whenever something gets too boring, he puts it in self-study. That is true, because I really don't see any value that I can add in the content that I have taken for you. But always remember one thing that the government does. not just for plastic, but for so many other initiatives. They organize these kind of hackathons. I'm sure you must have heard of this name, hackathon, before also. Hackathon. Hackathon here does not necessarily mean the computer meaning hacking. Yeah, hackathon in this case was a competition for startups and students of higher education institute to encourage innovation. Encourage innovation what? For solving the problem of single-use plastic. Okay, so that was the hackathon. So of these three things, what was important, which again comes back after one more slide, is this one. Is this one. India Plastic Pact. India Plastic Pact. So in India Plastic Pact, so India became the first Asian country. That's why this was in news, by the way. So it became the first Asian country to launch India Plastic Pact. And what did it do? It brought various businesses in the plastic value chain. What is the meaning of the value chain? Value chain means the plastic right from refinery and production all the way up to disposal and recycling. There are so many people, no? That's called as the value chain. Okay. Now, in this India Plastic Pact, the attempt or the emphasis was on creating what is called as a circular plastic system. So this I found was important and necessary. Everyone talks about, while we are talking of circular plastic system, I'm sure some of you would have heard of this name called circular economy. Circular economy, a linear economy and a circular economy, which is considered as a sustainable way of development of a country. Okay, an Unplastic Collective, in this case, I really would request you, if you can remember some of these initiatives and who were involved in those initiatives. For example, in this case, Confederation of Indian Industry and Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF. Okay. So let's come back to this. Yeah, so challenges. So India will. It's not going to be easy. You know, it's always good to have a vision, and it's an important political decision to say that we ban single-use plastic. But obviously, there are going to be a lot of difficulties. The first one is the target is very steep. In 1 year, people feel, the experts feel, it will be next to impossible to do complete replacement. But that's okay. No, it's not complete replacement. We will at least phase it up by 50%, 60%, whatever we're able to do, it is good. Okay. Now, there has also been opposition by the plastic industry. So for all industries, you have an association. So association said, sir, 2022 is too short. Why don't you make it 2023? Already we are reeling under an impact of COVID, and the people who manufacture these single-use plastics, they are small industries, really small industries, tiny industries. Yeah, they have already been impacted badly. Some may say, you know, under political tones. So you impacted them in demonetization a couple of years back. Now, because of COVID, they have been impacted once again. So please give us 1 year time. Now that has not been accepted, by the way, so far. Yeah. And the third thing, what people say is, we also, as a country, overall as a country, we lack adequate infrastructure. Infrastructure for what? For collection and segregation of plastic waste, so that we at least know how much of the plastic, single-use plastic, is getting into the municipal solid waste. So even we may find it very difficult to know how successful the banning of single-use plastic has. Okay, the way forward is interesting and also important. It has a lot of content which we need to discuss. The first way forward is more of a philosophy. Philosophy. There are, you know, people talk of 4 R's when it comes to plastic. You can tell this for anything, but for plastics, this is definitely up. The 4 R's are reduce, refuse, reuse, and recycle. Yeah, kind of self-explanatory. For example, instead of me buying that plastic bag from the lady, shopkeeper lady, if I had refused to buy, and let's say it was a short distance, I just took the banana in my hand and I came. So what did I do there? I refused. Okay. Now in the second case, what I've done, I've taken the plastic bag with her from her once. Okay. Then I reuse the same bag again, and I reuse the same bag again. So what am I doing? I am using a single-use plastic, but I am not using it as a single use. I'm using it as a plastic which can be used again and again. So that is reuse. reduce. What I do, every time I go, let's say out of 10 times, 6 to 7 times I'm remembering to take a jute bag with me. Okay, only 2 to 3 times I forget, and I am having to make use of a single-use plastic from the shopkeeper person. So what I'm doing, I'm reducing. Recycle, we all understand. Yeah, recycle I won't be doing as an individual. Recycle, you have a separate set of industry that does recycling. Okay, so one way forward is more on the philosophy, which is more on the conditioning of people, behavioral change of people. Yeah, all of this really matters. So that's on the 4 R's. The second part is alternatives. Man is a rational being. At least that's what the economic theory says. So not always rational, but when it comes to money, he's a little rational. Yeah. If we are able to produce something at the price of plastic, which is also environmentally sustainable, people will have no problem purchasing. Am I right? Yeah. So when it comes to alternative, there was once again a current affairs news article. I didn't want to make a full slide, but I thought I'll just make a point about it. So there is this project Replan. Replan by whom? Replan by Khadi and Village Industries Commission. Must have heard of it, KVIC. So Replan stands for Reducing Plastic in Nature. So they've even filed a patent. The patent is the plastic is mixed with paper. So here, what is Replan doing? It is actually reducing the plastic. So plastic is not completely removed. Plastic is mixed with paper, and they have had a patent also. And this was in news, and that's why it was in PIB. The government had given a prominent place in the news media. That is one part. What is happening internationally, and to some extent even nationally, is that movement towards safe alternatives. So this we will spend some time. What is meant by safe alternatives to plastic? So there are 3 different safe alternatives: bioplastic, biodegradable plastic, and recycled plastic. Bioplastic, biodegradable plastic, and recycled plastic. Let's look at them one by one. Just have a look at this slide for 10 seconds. We'll have some discussion on this. So as the name suggests, bioplastic or bio-based plastics are those plastics which are made from renewable biomass sources. Really cool, no? It's really very nice. Made from renewable and biomass sources. Now that biomass source could be agro-based feedstock, as in like corn and sugarcane. Corn and sugarcane are considered as useful inputs to make bioplastic. The second type is called as lignocellulosic feedstock. You're not supposed to remember it. At least remember the simpler version. Plants that are not eligible for food production. So one is plants that are eligible to be used as food. Plants that are not eligible to be used as food. Third is the feedstock base. This much you can remember. Plants that can be used as food, plants that cannot be used as food, and waste. So all of that goes into a machinery or a process, and that process or that place where it happens is called biorefinery. Are you able to see this word? Biorefinery. So biorefinery is a process which takes input of a biomass or organic waste, which is again a biomass, and converts them into different products. In this case, plastic. Is it clear? This is a simple definition of bio-based plastic or plastic that are derived from biomass. Now, what is the advantage you think of having a bioplastic? What do you think is the biggest advantage you have? Any idea? Why should we, divert food to making plastics here? Yeah, they are biodegradable because it is corn, feedstocks, organic waste. They are biodegradable, which means you're solving a huge problem. They are expensive, but they are biodegradable. Now, this is the conventional knowledge. But sometimes, where UPSC also touches upon, as I've told in the previous class also, they touch upon the exceptions also. If you get a question in the examination, something like this: are all bioplastics biodegradable? Automatically, your antenna should become alert the moment you look at the word all. Yeah, as it happens, more than 90% of the bioplastics are biodegradable, but there are some types of bioplastics which are non-biodegradable. Surprising as it may sound, when I try to understand why are they, because by definition, if they are going to be made from biomass, how can they not be biodegradable? How can they not be biodegradable? They have to be biodegradable. Yeah, the logic goes that in the biorefinery, there are certain additives that are getting added. And those additives change the chemical composition of the bioplastic from biodegradable to non-biodegradable. So whenever a question asks on all, always, invariably, these are what we call as in prelims language, we call them as extreme statements. So whenever you look at any extreme statement, automatically you have to be careful. Yeah, and spend a little bit more time. Maybe it is correct. Very rarely those extreme statements can also be correct. Yeah, but you have to be a little bit more careful rather than rushing to the answer. This is one such example, because logically, as Shweta said, bioplastics are the reason why we go for bioplastics is that they are meant to be biodegradable. But are all bioplastics biodegradable? It seems that the answer is no. Is this clear? Let's move on to the next one. So the first one was bioplastic. So we have just looked at this one. Completed this one. Now let's look at biodegradable plastic. Biodegradable plastic. Biodegradable plastic have got nothing to do with biomass. They have got nothing. But they are still biodegradable. Please try to understand the subtle difference. Biodegradable. So see, this kind of gives away the clue. Biodegradable means what? They are biodegradable. Yeah, they can be degraded and they don't cause harm to the environment. But bioplastic mixing plastic with paper won't make them completely biodegradable. So how efficient is it as an alternative? Okay, that's a good point. So in this case also, you are talking of the khadi and the village industries. You're talking of the KVIC example. Yeah, you're talking of KVIC. I got what you're saying. I went through the news article. The reason why it is patented, the reason why it is patented is the mixture as a whole is able to disintegrate over a long period of time. I have not gone into what is the chemical process, but it seems that they are adding some additives. That's why they have taken a patent to it. Otherwise, it would not have been a patent. No? If they mix with paper and only the paper disintegrates and the plastic remains, there is no fun. So they have done something in the process which makes this plastic in combination with the paper a little more biodegradable. Maybe it is not instantly biodegradable, but it is not that bad also where it lies on for 100 years. I have not gone into the detail, but that is why they have got the patent. For example, if you see, yeah, so the reason why they have got a patent registered was this was a novel concept where the plastic is mixed with handmade paper to make a third product. Now, just to give you an example, you will find that when it comes to human beings, the father has certain characteristics, the mother has certain characteristics, but the offspring may have certain characteristics which belongs neither to the father nor the mother. Have you seen it Sometimes, the father gets angry and he says, "You are not my son at all." Why does he say it? He says it, for example, let's say the father is a very disciplined guy. Maybe the son isn't for whatever reason. Yeah, because that's the creation of nature. It's not necessary that he or she needs to be an exact imprint where 50% is taken from mother and 50% from father. I mean, it's not a directly related example, but it's what happens in biology also happens in chemistry. Let me put it this way. Okay. Maybe we have some students who are also from chemistry and biochemistry. Maybe I'll speak with them later and understand what really happens in this. But from my side, the technical details, I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to biodegradable plastic. So biodegradable plastic, as the name suggests, they disintegrate. Okay. Here, there is nothing. It has got nothing to do with biomass. What are they made up of? They are made up of petrochemicals. But how can petrochemicals be biodegradable? By adding additives. Is the funda clear? Petrochemical, non-biodegradable. You added additives. Now what have you done? You have made them biodegradable. In a way, don't you think it is just the opposite of the previous case? Bioplastic, biomass, which is biodegradable. You added some additive, and in some cases, some product has become non-biodegradable. Here it is just the opposite. Okay. Now, when you look at the literature of biodegradable plastic, there are some interrelated terms which can be a little confusing. So I thought, I got this nice Venn diagram from the internet. I thought this was a very nice way to explain the concept of biodegradable, compostable, and oxo-degradable. We're going to discuss 3 parts: biodegradable, compostable, and oxo-degradable, and also photodegradable. To make matters worse, we're going to also talk of photodegradable. So let me go one by one. Biodegradable, compostable, oxo-degradable, and photodegradable. Biodegradable, we have just discussed, something which it can disintegrate. So what I do, I take a biodegradable plastic, I throw one plastic soil. Yeah, the same one, I throw it in water, or a different one, sorry, not the same one, different one. I throw the third one in compost. You understand compost? Compost is a soil conditioning material. You can see an example of compost. We make compost for our kitchen garden also. We put the peel of vegetables and all, and we make them to disintegrate into the soil, and it improves the fertility of the soil. That is compost. Okay. Very interestingly, there are some plastics which are compostable. So what does that mean? If you throw these plastics in the soil, they disintegrate and become part of the soil itself. So that's really interesting. Now, there is, so I'm repeating. So I have 3 types of biodegradable plastic. The first type of biodegradable plastic, I have put it in soil, the normal soil. It disintegrates. It disintegrates. I had put another plastic in water, that also disintegrates. The third one, I have put it in a compost, that also disintegrates. So all 3 of these plastics which disintegrate in soil, in water, and in compost, all 3 come under the broad category of biodegradable plastic. But the one that is compostable, it is specially called as compostable plastic. Will you be able to remember this much? And in order to make simple, this Venn diagram makes it very simple. What does this Venn diagram say? It says that all compostable plastics are biodegradable, but the opposite is not true. All compostable plastics, which means all plastics which can biodegrade themselves into a compost, they are biodegradable. But all plastics which biodegrade in soil and water, they are not necessarily compostable. Okay, make it very simple. And if you look at this Venn diagram, that's why I thought rather than me explaining, the Venn diagram is there. It will be there in your slide every time you look at the notes. Yeah, so you remember the Venn diagram, you'll be able to answer the question. Okay, that's point number 1. Now, in addition, there are 2 categories of plastics which are called as oxo-degradable and photo-degradable. Though I have put it under the heading of biodegradable plastic, please note these two, they disintegrate, but do not decompose. Very important point. It means that oxo-degradable, that's why it is kept outside the circle. No? It's kept outside the circle. So it is not part of the, it's not a subset. Oxo-degradable plastics, what are they? They are plastics which get disintegrated just by exposure of air, but they only get disintegrated. Disintegrated into what? Disintegrated into microplastic. But the actual decomposition, biodegradation does not happen. To that extent, oxo-degradable is not a biodegradable plastic. It disintegrates into microplastic, but it is not a biodegradable plastic. Similarly, photodegradable. Photo means light. All plastic which disintegrate with the help of sunlight, they become photodegradable. All plastic is disintegrated because of the presence of oxygen, they are oxo-degradable. But neither of them is biodegradable. Okay? I think a lot of related terms, but if you take time, go through the notes, remember what I said, I think you should be able to understand this. So far, so good. So we finished two parts. One is bioplastic. Now we have finished biodegradable plastic. The third one is recycled plastic. Recycled plastic or eco-plastic. Now in this, plastic is made from traditional petrochemicals. Is this biodegradable? No, it is not biodegradable. But then why are we calling it as eco-plastic? We are calling it eco-plastic because it prevents further use of petrochemicals to produce more plastic. Is this clear? So, if we have to summarize the three kinds of plastics over here, the way I would want to summarize is, so the first one is bioplastic, biodegradable plastic, recycled plastic, recycled plastic. So if I add source for bioplastic is biomass. Source for biodegradable plastic is the petrochemicals. Recycled plastic sources already made plastic. That's your source. Now, how are they produced? Bioplastics. They are produced in biorefineries. Biodegradable plastic. They are produced in the normal refinery, which is petrochemical. Recycled ones. So they are not produced, they are recycled. So they are produced in the recycler units. So far, so good. Now, the next point. Are they biodegradable? Answer is mostly yes. Mostly yes, because of the exception. Biodegradable plastics, invariably they are biodegradable. Recycled plastics, are they biodegradable? No, I mean, because they are normal plastics. So just try to understand it from this aspect. Source, how are they produced? Are they biodegradable? In fact, I can add one more point. So please consider this as the next column. How about the carbon footprints? You really have to think here to be able to answer. Carbon footprint for bioplastic. What do you think would be the carbon footprint? High, low? Carbon footprint, low. Absolutely, Abhishek. And how about biodegradable plastic carbon footprint? So when I say carbon footprint, sorry, let me complete it properly. Carbon footprint in production. I'm referring to production. Okay, so carbon footprint will be low. For biodegradable plastic, during production, the carbon footprint is high. Do you agree? Carbon footprint is high. Recycled plastic. Recycled plastic, what do you think about its carbon footprint? Any idea, guys? Carbon footprint will be, yeah, it will be low, at least relatively low as compared to the biodegradable plastic. Lower than biodegradable plastic. Yeah, moderate, exactly. You're right, Shweta. That is what I think Abhishek also meant low. So I'm comparing it lower than the biodegradable plastic. Because even the recycled plastic, when the first time they made, they had high carbon footprint, right? First time. Then subsequently it got lower. Okay. So I think since we have two people commenting on it, let's just revisit this bioplastic, biodegradable plastic, and recycled plastic. So when a biodegradable plastic is made, it is made in a refinery. So let me call it as a fossil fuel, and it uses energy. Is that correct? Uses energy. And fossil fuel is non-renewable. Okay. In a recycled kind of a plastic, it uses plastic only. So to that extent, you are not depleting the resources, but recycling also requires energy. Okay, which means its carbon footprint is still there because it is using energy. No, means suppose you have plastic bottles that goes into the recycler and they are making some plastic sheet. To melt them, you need energy. No? And where is that energy coming from? The energy is coming from some coal plant located in some part of India, which is supplying electricity to the grid, from which they have taken the electricity. That is why it is important to understand this part. Carbon footprint is not as high as this, but it is still there. That is why many people say when you say recycled plastic, try to understand it from an overall point of view. It is good to recycle, but how much energy are you using to recycle? You are trying to solve the problem of plastic, but you shouldn't end up causing the problem of greenhouse gas emissions. Is this point clear, guys? I hope it is clear. So if it is clear, let's move on to the other points. Oh yeah, plastic circular economy. This is once again another interesting point. Yeah, by the way, one more point I forgot to add is that when you're talking of this biodegradable plastics also, no, we talked of using additives. Yeah, please remember, because the notes is not exactly in flow, that's why I'm pausing and telling you this. We are talking of additives, but if you go back to few slides before, and I'll tell you which slide I'm referring to. Yeah, here. Look at this paragraph. There are many microorganisms which speed up biodegradation of plastics, but in the process, what do? They release methane. So it is not the biodegradable plastic maybe solves the plastic problem, but perhaps increases the greenhouse gas emission problem. So this should remind you of the ozone. The hydrofluorocarbon solved the ozone problem, but what did it did? It increased the GHG problem. Are you able to see how difficult it is to try to solve one problem? It creates another problem, as in life also, as some would say. So it is similar. You're trying to solve the plastic problem, but in the process, if you have used these microorganisms, one of the gas that they produce is methane, which is harmful. And in recycling, we have discussed in detail how the recycling is not a very low carbon footprint thing. It could be a moderate carbon footprint thing also. Okay. Plastic circular economy. So what is this? Overall, the economy can be of two types. One is called as a linear economy. So let's start with the linear economy. Linear economy. So this is your linear economy. Linear economy, the funda is very simple. Take, make, use, and dispose. So what are the four steps? Take from whom? Take from the environment. Make where? Make in the factories. Use where? Either in the industries or by the consumers. Fourth, dispose of. Dispose of where? Back to the environment. Yeah. So you're taking from the environment and you're dumping the waste product in the environment, which means it's a double whammy situation for the environment. On one hand, you're depleting the resource. On the other hand, you're making it dirtier and unfit for your own living. Okay, so this is your linear economy. So in other words, what you will always remember is linear economy generates waste. This is one thing you should remember. And try to remember these four catchy phrases. Take, make, use, and dispose. That's your linear economy. Plastic circular economy. Plastic circular economy is what? Plastic circular economy we have discussed under the government initiatives. This also came a few slides later, but I want you to remember. You can make a point or a note there. The same. Put a star mark also here. No? This is the same point what we are discussing now. India Plastic Pact, where I touched on the plastic circular economy. Yeah. So India is the first Asian country to launch. That is why we are studying it. That's why it came in the newspaper. Who are all the organizations? Worldwide Fund for Nature, India. Okay, and CII, they have joined together. Now, what is the key part? It brings all stakeholders and sets time-bound, target-based commitments. What should each one do as a target, and when should each one do as a time? Okay. Now it has a lot of, I would say, fairly. The target has been set really high, wherein they are talking of defining a list of unnecessary or problematic plastic packaging, and they are also saying in by 2030 or so, 100% of the plastic waste should be either reusable or recycled. So it's quite a tall aim. Okay. Now, what is it that they are trying to do in this plastic circular economy or the India Plastic Pact is can be best understood. We see how a circular plastic economy works. How a circular plastic economy works, and what are all the driving factors for a circular plastic economy. So let's take this picture. Maybe let's call this as one. You are producing. I am deliberately not taking remanufacturing now, but I'll come to it. You are producing the plastic, let's say. You are distributing it. The consumer uses it. After using, maybe the municipality or the government agency, they collect it. Let's say this is municipality, this is the consumer. This is the consumer. This is municipality. And from there is recycling happens. So recycling is again done by the recyclers, who are usually the private sector guys. Now what have they done? So you have used a plastic water bottle, it has come to the recycler. The recycler has melted the plastic water bottle to make something else. Let's say sheet, plastic sheet. Now that plastic sheet, something more gets added. Yeah, here a value addition takes place. Either he can send it as a plastic sheet, or let's say from recycler he made a plastic sheet and they have taken some mold and they have let's say melted these sheets together to form something like plastic utensils. That is where this design is coming. Yeah, the recycled one is made as a raw material which can be used in different industries. Then you have a plastic utensil. Now the plastic utensil will again, so that is the production here. Yeah, so at the time of plastic utensil, if it's here, then once again it goes into the same thing. But it is not exactly the same circle, it's a different circle, having the same components. Because earlier it was plastic bottle, now it has become a plastic utensil. Okay. Now, what has happened here? The plastic was produced once from the, let's say 1 ton of plastic bottle was produced. Out of that, maybe 700 kilograms of plastic utensils are produced in the next cycle. So what has happened? The waste is now only 30%. 70% has been utilized. So that's an example of circular economy. Unlike the linear economy, which was you take, you make, you use, and you dispose. Here, if you look at it, the word dispose is getting replaced by recycling and collection. Collection and recycling. Okay, so you're not disposing of to the environment. Now, what is this green color circle in the middle? And it has these 3 terms: economics, sustainability, regulation. So what does this mean? The circular plastic economy is driven by regulation. What does this mean? The collection is as per the regulation. Recycling is as per the regulation. Yeah, how it should be collected, where recycling should happen, where the recycler should be located, what are the safety precautions that the recycler should take. All that is defined in regulation. Okay. Now, why are we doing so much regulation? Is to ensure that the development is sustainable. So, circular plastic economy is a means of sustainable development. You can very confidently say that it's a means of sustainable development, which means the objective of a circular plastic economy is sustainability. The driving force is regulation, but the stakeholders in it will get into the business of circular economy only if it is remunerative. Therefore, there needs to be an economics of the plastic economy, of the circular plastic economy. Once all these three things comes, then only the whole process itself will be sustainable. Okay. So, circular plastic economy, the objective is move towards sustainable development, and it is driven by regulation because you need to have the force of law to make people drive towards a particular thing. But law alone will not be sufficient. It has to be profitable. Therefore, you have economics. That's why these three parts of what cycle? Recovery and recycling circle. Okay, so this in simple words is circular plastic economy. Maybe I'll touch upon a little bit overall the concept of circular economy when we discuss sustainable development. Okay, good. So that completes plastic once and for all. So plastic and marine really took a lot of time. But I did not expect that it would take a time. But when I look at the notes, I feel that we perhaps have done reasonable justice to these two topics. And plastic, especially because 2021 and it's close to the Prime Minister and all that, I believe we should be glued on to anything that happens on plastic. So just remember it from a prelims 2022 or from a mains 2022 perspective. Just remember that plastic is going to be a little more important than some of the other pollution. Okay. In fact, as a teacher, I always have this dilemma between how much to cover, which is the spread part, and how deep should I go, which is the depth part. So the spread and depth are two dimensions which is very difficult to reconcile, especially in an examination like UPSC. So I go by, I go through the question paper and all that, but I usually go by my heart. As in, if I were an aspirant, and if I got second chance to prepare for civil services examination, how would I prepare? How would I prepare in a way that I can remember it better without trying to mug up too many facts? Because I'm very, very poor in memorizing facts. I've always been like that. So, so coming to the point, I felt that somewhat we are kind of detail oriented. And when I look at the newspaper, especially, I've started reading newspapers. I was not so regular before I started this class. But after starting this class, I started reading newspapers. And I'm beginning to feel that anything on global warming, climate change, air pollution, when I read the news, I'm seeing, okay, all these points we have touched upon. So I think the student, if he or she goes through it, they should be able to connect to it well. I think that is one objective that we are striving for. In fact, today when I read this, there was one center page article on Glasgow. We have seen this senior diplomat, senior civil servant had written on Glasgow. Very interestingly, I did not know that he's going to write that article when I talked about environmental legislation. But if you look at the last 2-3 paragraphs of this article, he mentions about 1972 Stockholm Conference, because of which India came back and made this 42nd amendment, which brought in 51A, G and 48A. He talks about that. He also talks about Article 273. So when you read that, you feel happy. Okay, good. It's not a surprise thing. Array, what is this? Where it come from? So there is no substitute for thoroughness, is what I understand. And in the process, as you're already seeing it, the number of classes is increasing. But I believe that's a trade-off that we should be okay with. Attending a couple of more classes so that the quality and the depth is not compromised. Okay, so that's my philosophy. I thought I'll just let you know before we move on to e-waste. Okay, so e-waste, we all know what does E stand for in this? E stands for electronic. But interestingly, though it stands for electronic, it also includes electrical. Yeah, and especially if you are a electrical and electronics engineer like me, that's a very significant difference. Electronic is like your electronic items, yeah, like your hard drive, your mobile phone, your let's say Kindle, laptop. Yeah, this full is electronic. Yeah, this guy is full is electronic. All these small capacitors and ICs and all those are all electronic. Electrical is your refrigerator, your air conditioner. The reason why I'm saying this, in electronic, you get different kinds of waste. In electrical, you get a different kind of waste. For example, in electrical, the waste that you get is copper, iron, things like that. But in electronic, the waste that you get is some of the slightly rare metals. For example, you will get mercury in some places, lead in some places, even silver in some places. Okay, and silicon, obviously silicon. How could I miss it? Silicon, lithium ion, because battery is lithium ion. You'll get selenium. Some of the semiconductors are selenium. But when it comes to e-waste, they have clubbed electrical and electronic. Even though E stands for electronic, but E actually includes both electrical and electronic. Yeah, and just to drive home this point, I have given this point just to make sure you remember that E stands for computer monitor is electronics, electronics, electronics. Charger is combination of electrical and electronics. This is electronics, electronics. Television set, these days they are more of electronics, but in our time they were more of electrical. Air conditioners, even now this is electrical. I consider them as electrical. Refrigerator is electrical. Okay, so it's a combination of electrical and electronic waste, which is covered under e-waste. And obviously, it becomes a waste when they are physically present. For example, a mobile phone charger, it is still there, but when you switch it on switch it on, it is not charging the mobile. So what do? You throw it off and you purchase a new charger. Okay, so that's an example of electronic waste. And electronic waste can be both organic as well as inorganic. Organic chemistry, we say organic chemistry, something like that. One that consists of carbon, hydrogen. Okay, I think we call catenation something. So organic and inorganic compounds. And pictorially, I think it's very clear what we mean when we talk of electronic waste. So I should actually put this in yellow. I don't know why I did not put, because it's more of self-study, a lot of conceptual part. But yeah, let me just highlight one or two points in this. Like your plastic, e-waste also has extended producer responsibility. So you can relate to it. But something new in e-waste, what they have added is the concept of producer responsibility organization. Producer responsibility organization. Now, what this means is, imagine a big IT company, any company, let's say Infosys. Okay. So in one location, they have some 10,000 people. It means 10,000, more than 10,000, maybe monitors, laptops, overhead projectors, DVD screens, anything electronic that you can consider. A lot of electronic items. Over a period of time, being an Indian company, they have to adhere to this e-waste management. Now, now what are they saying? As per the e-waste management rule, they need to have extended producer responsibility. Means take back of end of life product. Okay, which means this company has purchased laptop, let's say from IBM or Dell. So they purchased the laptop. Now, once the laptop has passed its life, they just cannot throw it out. Yeah, they are supposed to hand over those electronic items to this producer responsibility organization. So the purpose of producer responsibility organization itself was to strengthen EPR, as it is mentioned here, extended producer responsibility. What are they doing? They become specialized in proper disposal of waste. So what they do, they will first try to extract some metals from the e-waste. If you look at motherboard of a computer, if you have ever looked at a motherboard, it's a big piece of electronic board which has some amount of plastic, which is green in color, because that is what the board is. But there are a lot of integrated circuits, ICs, kept on them at various places. So in one board, if you see, you will have plastic, you will have silicon, because that is the electronic item. Wherever there is something called capacitor, wherever there is a capacitor, there is a plastic. There is something called inductor. So wherever there is an inductor, there is a wire, there is a copper, there is a port. Yeah, we used to have this VGA port or whatever port. So the port is again partly plastic. Then there will be special circuits. In some part, the circuits are made up of copper. In some cases, they may be even made up of silver. So there is silver, which means in one, let's say 10 by 10 inches of motherboard, you have so many different components, and it is not easy to extract, and you cannot dispose them also. So who does that job? The producer responsibility organization does that job. Is this clear? So that's why they have a dedicated organization whose purpose is to extract value. By the way, these producer responsibility organization, when I say they have to extract, first thing, the image that will go to you is you think of some Rattiwala with a Ratti behind his back and taking producer. No, these are actually high-tech startups. I am saying this confidently because I am related to IIT in some ways, the research part, where there are some startups who work on circular economy. So in that, I have come across startups who work on how to profitably, basically they say how to profit from e-waste. There are two challenges for this producer responsibility organization. I think you should remember this. The first challenge that these guys face is technology challenge. Why do I say technology challenge? Otherwise, how do you extract so many things from a single 10 by 10 board, which have different melting points, different properties, and all that? So one is the technology. The bigger challenge is safety. Safety / health of people who are involved in it. Okay, so this is an emerging business, and why the producer responsibility organization, they are like mushrooming, they're actually growing in big number, is because of lithium ion. So lithium is considered as extremely important futuristic metal, because lithium is a very light metal, and lithium ion batteries, and China is a world leader in lithium. So India is trying to, whatever lithium has already come into India, they're trying to extract the lithium from the existing boards so that you can mine the lithium and use it or reuse it. Okay, so that's on the e-waste management rule. Then the 2016 rule got amended at 2018. What they said was, they started putting a target. Suppose 1 ton of e-waste comes to you, minimum it should be 10%, long back. Every year it should increase by 10%, and you should be able to extract 70% of the total extractable material from the waste that you get. Now that's quite a tall order. Now, as the target becomes steeper, the technology also becomes more and more complex. Okay, so that's the first point. So the first thing what change they have done in 2018 is phase-wise collection target. The next thing what they said is the responsibility of the producer is not confined to waste collection alone, but also to ensure that the waste reaches the authorized recycler or dismantler. Okay, so in this case, the Infosys cannot say that we will collect the waste and we will give it to that person. It needs to make sure that it has reached the recycler, and they have to get a confirmation that the material has reached. So why this clause was used was a possible misinterpretation where the technology company says, hey, we have given it for waste collection, but when you look at the waste collection guide, they were not able to match the quantities, which means it could mean that some amount of electronic waste has got dispersed in the environment, which can be dangerous. Okay, yeah, and the third point what they made, the producer responsibility organizations are required to apply to the Central Pollution Control Board to take registration, obviously, because this is a very, very, very specialized job. No? Not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can do it. So highly specialized. That's why I said there are some startups who are doing this, where they are trying to gain profit through e-waste. So it's a very, very specialized role. Okay? So that's on the e-waste rules. Some of the e-waste management in India. This was once again a news article, which also came in the down to earth. So some points here, some facts more from a prelims point of view. Yeah, that's why I took this story from a prelims perspective. So one fact that you need to remember is we are, so it's a wrong way to put the statement basically. Largest producer means we are actually the third largest producer. China is first, United States is second, and we are the third largest producer of e-waste. The problem with e-waste is changing now is earlier it was in the informal sector. Collection, transportation, processing, recycling, everything was in the informal sector. This kind of gave some scare to the government because of the hazards involved for human health. Okay? But it is still in the informal sector. And at this point, I have kind of discussed this with you as to why it is difficult. It consists of variety of material. Though it is called electronic waste, it has 5-6 different types of dominant group of material which needs to be extracted from one, let's say, computer motherboard. Okay, so these are some of the challenges. And what happens if the e-waste seeps into the groundwater, or if it is burned, if it is thrown in the landfill, all those things we are well aware of, because e-waste contains some of these metals like iron, selenium. Selenium and all is cancer causing, by the way. So even in trace quantities, it can be very dangerous. So some of these challenges I have mentioned. But what is making India a e-waste destination? This is something that you can just pause and think. I wrote 4 points, which is self-explanatory. Why? On one hand, if you look at it, I as a person would generally not change my mobile phone in about 5 years' time. Yeah, 3.5, 4, 5 years. Yeah, I comfortably use a mobile phone for 5 years. But I'm not sure that's the case with majority of them. Yeah, especially if you look at people who are using Apple iPhone, because every, I don't know, 2 years they release a version or something, right? iPhone. So more often than not, people migrate to the newest version. Yeah, which means what is happening? Two things are happening here. A, you are tech savvy. You're tech savvy. B, your income is improving. That's why you're able to afford iPhone. Decrease in cost of electronics may not be applicable for Apple, but overall, if you see, in terms of features and the cost of mobile phone, it has drastically come down. So there is a natural tendency for people to use more and more electronic items. For example, if you see in your home itself, you see, you will have a laptop. If your parents are still using, they may use a PC also. You'll have a PC, you'll have a laptop. Many of you will be having an iPad. Then you'll be having a mobile phone. Maybe some of you may also be having a Kindle, for example. Am I missing something? Do you use anything else? Yeah, you may have a Fitbit also. Yeah, to track your heartbeat, calorie count. What other electronics do we have? Broadly, these are the major electronics, as in hardcore electronics: mobile phone, iPad, laptop, PC. If you are a keen reader, Kindle, of course, you may say Kindle no more we are using because that's coming as an app also. So all these things have led to increased use of digital equipment. For example, I'm not sure if anyone has done it, but if you look at per capita digital ownership of India, I'm sure it is increasing at a rapid pace. Okay. One, because everything is moving towards digital. Even notes, civil services notes, for example. I remember when we used to have bundles of books on our table. You also have bundles of books on table, but on top of it, you have megabits of data or maybe gigabits of lectures and videos and whatnot. So there is an increasing focus on digitization also. And on top of it all, we still are a IT sector. We are a hub of the IT sector. So all this has led to increasing e-waste in India. Now, be it e-waste or any other waste, there is an innovative concept that is coming up, which is called as design for environment. Just remember this. The name is self-explanatory. What are you doing? You're designing a product for taking environment into consideration. Taking a product like environment into consideration. And it's not a product, it could be a process or a service also. It could be a process or service. For example, basic things like paperless office. Yeah, changing all the process from paper-based to e. So that can be considered as a design for environment. But the problem is there you are saving the paper, but you're causing more e-waste. Yeah. So, but overall, I just wanted, looks like this topic is taken out from somewhere else, but I just wanted you to remember that there is something called as design for environment approach, which is quite popular in some of the Western countries. Okay. So that brings us to the end of e-waste also. So we've completed plastic, we've completed e-waste. The next topic is biomedical waste. So what are all the things that you need to remember in biomedical waste? So biomedical waste, as the name suggests, it's a waste that gets generated during the diagnosis, treatment, or immunization of human beings or even animals. That's an overall definition of a biomedical waste. But what are the various classifications of biomedical waste? There are subdivisions within biomedical waste. So what they do, if you have seen in a hospital, big hospital or even small hospital, because now the rules are much stricter, based on what is the biomedical waste, they put it in a particular bag. So when you say yellow bag, they actually have a yellow bag or a dustbin colored in yellow. Okay, so there are 4 broad categories. Some people say 5 also, but I have gone with the 4 wala rule. 4 broad categories: yellow, red, blue, and black. Okay, so what are yellow bags? They are the ones where this is the operative part. Object comes in contact with the body fluids or human part, like a bandage, for example. It has directly come in touch with the injured part. Therefore, the bandage will be filled with human fluid, but also bacteria or microbes. So they are classified as yellow bags. Now let's come to blue bags. Blue bags is all type of glasses that are used, glass items that are used, and discarded medicines whose expiry date has crossed. So for this yellow and blue bag, the disposal method, the proposed disposal method, as per even the rules, the biomedical waste, is deep burial, not just ordinary burial. And there are rules how deep it should be, what is the procedure and all, but we need not go into. So that is yellow and blue. Let's come to the red bag. Let's come to the red bag. Red bag, what do we have? We have the catheters. I don't know if you have heard catheters. It's a tube, flexible tube, which is inserted into the body on certain types of operations. You can just Google and know about them more. Syringe. You all understand syringe? Syringe and injection, or the needle, both are different. Needle is fitted to the syringe. Yeah, syringe is the plastic one. If you have ever gone for a blood donation or even blood test, when the nurse, she kind of creates a vacuum, your blood gets filled in the syringe. The blood is taken from the needle, but it gets filled in the syringe. So that is your red bag. Now, red bag, they have a separate procedure called as a secured landfill. Now, how is it secured? What are all the process? I am not covering, but just suffice for you to remember that there is a secured landfill. And for all the sharp items like syringes, blade, scissors, if they are using it, all of them, it comes under a separate category called black bag, which are disposed by what are called as sharp bit. So all the sharp items are first put in a metal or any enclosure like a strong metal enclosure, and they are separately disposed of. So you have 3 broad categories of disposal for 4 broad categories of biomedical waste. That's the introduction about biomedical waste. Now comes your biomedical waste rules. So one thing this rule did, initially the biomedical rule was applicable only for hospitals. In 2016, what they did, they included it to all, even blood donation camps and vaccination camps, they included everything. So wherever there is a contact of a human person with a medical instrument, that comes under the ambit of biomedical waste management rule. Okay, and they have given what are all the various things that they need to have. For example, a lot of biomedical plastic bags. Where do you see plastic bags in a hospital? When they collect blood, you have seen the blood when they collect, or even for a patient who is not able to use the washroom, the urine of the patient. All of them are collected in special plastic bags. They are chlorinated plastic bags, and obviously we know that anything related to chlorinated plastic bags can be harmful to the environment. So they have talked about phasing within 2 years, and it again comes in 2018 also, we'll see. And then what they have also mentioned is any liquid waste from hospital, it needs to be treated before it gets mixed with other liquid waste, even of the municipal solid waste. Are you able to understand? So when a hospital has a liquid waste, it goes and connects to the municipal sewer. Before that, it is supposed to be treated. So that's quite a stringent requirement. Okay. And there are a couple of other things about having a disposal register, providing training to health workers, etc. So you can read it. There is nothing much for me to really teach here. And then there are certain amendments in 2018 in which they are talking about having an annual report on the website, barcoding of the disposable facilities and all. So it's quite high on the standard, though it's really to be seen how much of the hospitals are able to follow. So by now you would have seen that what is happening is for both, maybe you have already seen this. So we have looked at what? We have looked at plastic. We have looked at e-waste. We looked at biomedical waste, and we will also look at municipal solid waste. So what was common, between all four of them? All four of them had their most important rule in the year 2016. You would have seen plastic waste management rule. So 2016, the rule that came, it was called as the Managed Plastic Waste Management Rule, or the e-waste management rule, biomedical waste management rule, or the municipal solid waste management. Then in 2018, they brought an amendment. So all these rules became amendment. Plastic waste amendment in bracket management rule. E-waste amendment in bracket and management rule. So this became like this. And it stopped here, but only for plastic alone, we have further. Yeah. So you can clearly see that plastic seems to be the real focus of the government of India. And because we also discussed that this is a cause that the Prime Minister himself has personally championed. Okay, so this table will help you understand that 2016-2018 is common for all these four. In fact, it's little more. Even there is something called, I'm not mentioned it in my slide, there is also something called disposal of hazardous waste, and disposal of construction and building material. Construction and building material. Even they had this 16 and 18. Yeah, since it was not at all there in any of the current affairs, I've not used it. If it comes, I'll use it by March, because we have left out topics. Okay, great. Radiation pollution, we are nearing the end of pollution, and this perhaps could be the last pollution. There is a short write-up on noise pollution, which really doesn't require much noise and persistent organic pollution. Just one slide for each. Either we do it in this class or we can do it in the next class. Radiation, we will spend some time. Okay. What is a radiation, by the way? How do you define radiation? Any idea? Radiation can be defined as a idea. Radiation can be defined as, so it is defined as a source of energy. Radiation is defined as a source of energy. Now when I say radiation pollution, what comes to your mind? Means, does an image or or anything that comes to your mind? Radiation pollution. So this is what I remember when someone talks of radiation. Fukushima, very good. Okay. Japan. That's a very important point, Abhishek. Chernobyl, okay. Good, Vaibhav. Yeah, Vishenjit, you're right, Chernobyl. There is some, I also remembered the same thing. Then I saw the googly. I was also a little surprised. Okay, so even before I go to this, now I give a statement that radiation pollution, okay, is or radiation is invariably harmful to human beings. Yes or no? Radiation is invariably harmful to human beings. There can be a little confusion. I'm also asking a little vaguely. Okay, now I'll ask you a couple of other questions so that people who have answered beyond a certain threshold, yes. Invariably harmful, no. Not always. Good. Do you know a radiation which is not harmful? Now I think we are moving the right. Excellent, excellent. Example, infrared. Okay. Anyone else knows a radiation which is not harmful? Radiation which is not harmful. X-ray, yes. If it is in small quantities, it is not harmful. But in larger amounts, it is harmful. Any other radiation? Yeah, exactly. Sun's radiation. How about visible rays? That's also radiation. How about radio waves? They are also radiation. How about TV waves? They are also radiation. Yeah. So the first thing when I said no, googly for me was to understand the difference between radiation and radioactive radiation. And I also thought exactly along what you guys have thought about Chernobyl and Fukushima. That is definitely radiation pollution, but it is a special type of radiation pollution limited to radioactive substances. Okay. Now that Nigar has kind of mentioned what I was looking for, there are large frequency of radiation which is not at all harmful. Now I have a tube light in this room. That's not harmful. I hope so. It's not harmful. Yeah. And we get up in the morning for sunlight. In fact, that radiation is useful because that helps you produce vitamin D. So there are so many radiations which are actually positive, which are helpful. There is only a small amount of radiation which is dangerous. And I'm sure that I have a couple of more questions here because this, among the other topics, is a little technical. So there will be a to and fro on this. So let's get started. Emission or transmission of energy in the form of wave or particle through a medium. That is radiation. Okay. In fact, during your school days, it's a related point. Have we studied that there are 3 modes in which heat can get transferred? Do you recollect that? What are the 3 modes in which heat can get transferred? Can someone tell me what are the 3 modes in which heat can get transferred? Conduction, correct. Radiation, that's also correct. Convection, absolutely. Conduction, convection, and radiation. So these are the 3 things that they would have taught in our school days. So radiation is also a means in which heat can be transferred, by the way. Okay. Second part. So all of you should remember this. Radioactive pollution is the most serious part of radiation pollution. Which means radioactive is a subset of radiation pollution. Okay. Now, the reason why we always confuse radiation with radioactive pollution, I think, is perhaps because of this simple. Everywhere you go, it is written that unsafe radiation. Do not enter this area, unsafe radiation. It is true, it is unsafe radiation, but it is unsafe because it is a radioactive radiation. So try to understand the difference between radiation. If I were to make a Venn diagram, the way we did it for bioplastic, so I will call this as radiation overall, and I'll call this as radioactive. So Is radioactive a type of radiation? Yes. But are all radiations radioactive? No. Okay, I hope this Venn diagram solves the problem. Okay. So what are all the sources? I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Where do we now? We will be alternating between radiation and radioactive radiation. But when we talk of pollution, the pollution that is lethal is usually the radioactive pollution. But the pollution which can be harmful can also be a non-radioactive pollution. Are you able to understand? And in a minute, I'll perhaps explain it a little bit more. So let's start with classification of radiation. This will, put an end to some of the doubts that we have. Classification of radioactive radiation. Sorry, classification of radiation, not radioactive. Classification of radiation. Those radiations which are of lesser intensity, they are called as non-ionizing radiation. Non-ionizing. Now, what is the meaning of ionize? Any idea? Ionize. What do you mean when you say the radiation is ionizing in nature? It can do something. Yeah. So when you say radiation is ionizing in nature, you are basically saying, let me take this. You're basically saying this can break whom? It can break chemical bonds. Because so strong is the energy. Non-ionizing radiation, lesser intensity. Like what? Infrared, radio wave, microwave, television waves, they're all non-ionizing. Ionizing radiations, very dangerous. X-ray, if you're exposed beyond a point, it is very dangerous. The upper UV rays, do you recollect UV ray ABC? The upper UV rays, alpha, beta, gamma rays, neutrons, which are produced by a nuclear fission. All these are ionizing radiation. In fact, if you remember, that's why they say that you shouldn't take X-rays very frequently. Yeah, and in fact, do you know that CT scan, between CT scan and X-ray, which do you think is more dangerous? Any idea? Sometimes in UPSC they ask this type of questions. CT, are you sure? Arun, Sheta? Absolutely, they are right. And the order of magnitude is something like one CT scan is equal to 300 X-rays. So X-ray itself is dangerous. Now, why I am saying this? Because we are just out of the COVID kind of a situation. So, in case of my father, then I realized how maybe somewhat, MRI is much less harmful, Vaibhav. I'll get back to you on the exact difference. But MRI is not as dangerous as CT, Vaibhav. I'll get back to you on the exact difference because it's magnetic resonance imaging. So I'll get back to you on it, but MRI is not that dangerous. The reason why I talked about CT is when you are admitting a patient for a COVID patient, at the time of admission, they take a CT scan. Okay. Now, at the time, which means, let's say today he has got admitted, you take a CT scan. And when he is discharged, they again take a CT scan. Which means 2 CT scans within a gap of how many days? 1 week. I mean, assuming the person recovers, or let's say after 2 weeks. Which means how many X-rays? 600 X-rays. So, they did it for my father. At that time, I did not realize. While just casually browsing, when I saw it, it caught my attention and I was a little shocked. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe if someone is from medical background, you can help me understand if there is a better way. And MRI could be a better way, though I am not, I have not really done research into it. I'll do it and get back to you. But CT is really dangerous, guys. So in your family, and when I say dangerous, X-ray is dangerous, what am I actually referring to? Invariably, it will cause some type of a cancer. So just be extra careful when the doctor asks you to do a CT scan. It needs to be done when it is absolutely essential. Yeah. See, you feel MRI is better, Nigar. You may, if you have data, then it's good. I also felt MRI is better. So please be extremely careful when someone suggests CT scan. Okay. Ask them, will X-ray not suffice? Sometimes the doctor does not like the question, but it's okay. It is his judgment, but it is your life or your parents' life or your spouse or siblings' life. So just be extra careful next time when someone says about CT scan. Okay. Okay. Where were we? Yeah, so we were here. X-ray, more dangerous than X-ray is CT. alpha, beta, gamma, neutrons produced by nuclear fission. Okay, so that's good. Let's move on to the next one. Yeah, I thought I'll spend 2 minutes on this. Sometimes, getting the full picture makes you feel happy, and you can come back to the slide whenever you have a doubt. So what have I done? So the heading I have put is electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetic spectrum. Yeah, by the way, why are they called electromagnetic? All the radiations, by their very nature, they have what is called as an electrical field and a magnetic field. What do they have? They have an electrical field or a magnetic field. Now, I will not be able to explain electrical field and magnetic field. Suffice to say that if you keep a compass or some magnetic instrument, some of them will respond based on the intensity of the radiation. Okay. So electromagnetic spectrum. So spectrum means one end to another. Electromagnetic. So what are we talking about? Let's take this line first. Frequency. Frequency is in hertz. So you start with 1 hertz. What is 1 hertz? This up and then down. This is happening in 1 second. 1 second. So 1 hertz means 1 cycle. The time it has taken is 1 second. This is the meaning of 1 hertz. Okay. So now by this definition, the AC that we use in our house, what is that frequency? The alternating current that we use in households in India. US has a different thing. How many cycles in 1 second? 50. That's correct, Vaibhav. 50. Which means what it does, that in 1 second, it goes up and down 50 times. Which means 1 cycle is 1 by 50 seconds. It's called as 20 milliseconds. That is 1 cycle of an AC wave. In US, they have a 60 hertz. But overall, world over, we have 50 hertz for AC cycle. Okay, so that's 1 hertz. Radio waves. Radio waves are at a frequency of 10 power 5. It is roughly 100 kilohertz. And it goes a little above. It goes all the way up to, let's say, 10 power 7 hertz. 10 power 6 or 10 power 7. Yeah. For example, if you see FM 98.3, there was also 95.1 or whatever. All these are megahertz. So it is 98.3 into 10 power 6 hertz, which is a little more than this. So radio waves is somewhere here. FM, your FM channel is somewhere here. Okay. Then comes your television waves. Television waves is also here. Can someone tell me approximately in which area is your mobile signal coming? This is something that will help if you know it. Your mobile phone's frequency range. You can just tell me to closer to which one they are. X-ray, gamma ray, ultraviolet ray, infrared ray, radar waves, microwaves, television waves, radio waves, or out of the picture. Any idea? Mobile phone. So mobile phone, once again, it's a big range, but it approximately comes in this region, somewhere in this region. You see, they have something called as 2 gigahertz. It can be more also. It started much earlier. 2 gigahertz means what? 2 into 10 power 9 hertz. So it is roughly, by the way, mobile communication also is a type of radio wave communication. Okay? So it can't be very much above the radio wave and television wave. So it's somewhere at around megahertz, hundreds of megahertz to gigahertz. It sometimes helps to know these basic things. At least UPSC sometimes considers this as basic things. So this is your mobile wave. Then you have microwave, radar, infrared, and all that we can see in this world is a tiny sliver of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It's so amazing. No? We can't see so many things. Yeah, we can't see so many. We can see only if our eyes are sensitive to the radiation between how much? Between 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. That's all. Our eyes can only feel it. That itself makes the world so beautiful. No? Imagine if you're able to see even beyond and above. Yeah, it could be somewhat helpful. Maybe if you're able to see up to X-rays and gamma rays, somewhere you see gamma ray, you sense gamma ray, you can escape yourself, but you can't see it. Anyway, so that's the ones which are having the maximum frequency, as you can see, are the gamma rays. Now I deliberately put this image also here, just for people to realize it. When you say high frequency, you see it so many waves in a short span. When you look at low frequency, less number of waves. Okay, so frequency and wavelength are inversely correlated. So higher the frequency, lower the wavelength. Higher the wavelength, lower the frequency. Okay, and frequency and energy are directly proportional. I think this we have discussed. Higher the frequency, higher is the energy. Okay, so this is your electromagnetic spectrum. All the pollution that you can think of when Chernobyl happened or Fukushima happened, the radiation that was emitted was in this range. Okay, but when a mobile phone tower is emitting radiation, the radiation is only in this range. Is in this range. Yeah, good. Let's look at some of the impact of radioactive pollution. What happens? What are the two types of impact due to radioactive radiation? The first impact is called as a somatic damage. You must have heard of it. Somatic. Somatic, it's also called as radiation sickness. What is it called? Radiation sickness. What does it mean? Somatic damage refers to damage of the non-reproductive cells in the body. Simple. Suppose there is a leak in the nuclear reactor, and if the operator was very close by, you should see some images of Chernobyl. You can see that their skin has just melted on top. It is cracked. It looks very horrible actually. So the radiation has penetrated the skin quite literally. So that's a somatic damage. So what happens? The person dies. Okay, the person dies. At least that's the end of the story. The future generation is not impacted. But there is a second kind of damage where the reproductive cells or cells associated with reproduction are damaged, and the damage goes all the way up to the genes and it mutates the genes. So we call it as a genetic damage. So there are broad two kinds: somatic damage and genetic damage. Genetic damage can pass on from one generation to another. If you have seen any documentary or come across the literature of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you will find that people who were born to parents who were infected with because in Hiroshima the death had happened in two ways. One was the impact of the heat, yeah, so people had died. Other people did not immediately die, but the radiation was so high that they died after few months. But between they getting impacted by radiation and between the death, let's say they produced babies, and those babies also had some of these diseases associated with radiation pollution, radioactive radiation pollution. Okay. Now, how can someone get a radioactive pollution? So it's a function of two things. One is the intensity of the radiation. Intensity of radiation. Second is duration of exposure. Now, there are situations where, let's say in case of Chernobyl, this was a case of very high intensity for a short duration because the person was evacuated, but the intensity was very high. So eventually what happens? The person dies. There are also some cases, and you tell me which case, where the intensity is low intensity, but prolonged exposure. Low intensity and prolonged exposure. Do you know someone who has died because of this? Low intensity, but prolonged exposure. After effects, you are right. Low intensity, prolonged exposure, you are right. So let me put it this way. I am looking for a name. I don't want to give a clue. And it's the name of a woman, a lady. If that doesn't, excellent, Abhishek. Good. I'm referring to Madame Curie or Marie Curie as they call it. She was one person who was working on the field of radioactivity. 1950, and she is credited. In fact, the beauty about Madame Curie is she is the only person who has got two Nobel Prize for two different subjects. So she got Nobel Prize for physics, then she got Nobel Prize for chemistry in a span of 2 years. She's one remarkable lady who has done so much for science. But unfortunately, hers is a case where she was working. So she is known to have found this thing called radium, and the other substance that she found is polonium. Okay, anyway, so that's about Madame Curie. Okay, the unit of measurement is called REM. REM stands for Röntgen equivalent men. So Röntgen is once again Wilhelm Röntgen. It's from a Germany guy, and he is the one who is credited with the invention of X-rays. Yeah, so it is that Röntgen. So the unit of measurement of radiation is measured by REM. So when the REM is less than 1 milli REM, then our body itself adjusts. If there is a minute damage, then the body repairs itself. But if the exposure is more than 100 REM, it is called as radiation sickness or acute radiation symptom. It's called as radiation sickness or acute radiation symptom, ARS. It's called as ARS, radiation sickness or acute radiation syndrome. This is what happens when something like Chernobyl happened or Fukushima happened. Okay, so I have also highlighted some of the important nuclear accidents, of which you are expected to know only these three. First three. Okay, Fukushima Daiichi 2011. And in this three, what you need to remember is these two were human error. Both of them are human error. There are a lot of short videos on Chernobyl. When you get the chance, you can look at it. That is on human error. This was an act of God. Why an act of God? Because there was earthquake followed by tsunami. And even though they had a breach wall, maybe some 8-10 feet, the water came on top of the breach wall. Okay, and it flooded the nuclear reactor. So there was also serious concerns that it has also caused the water to be radioactive. Okay. So to that extent, the nuclear accidents are a little. You know what this nuclear accident did? It caused a somewhat. It had an impact on India. Any idea what kind of impact it had on India? It impacted India related to nuclear field. That's the clue for you. Any idea? It put brakes on a particular initiative. Excellent, Abhishek. Kudankulam. So Kudankulam project was a joint venture between Russia and India. Now the Indians said, because we hold the Japanese people in high regard, the Indians said that if Japan could not save a nuclear power plant, then where does India or Russia stand? So there was a lot of opposition to the Kudankulam project, but eventually the government went ahead and the reactors are getting made in Kudankulam in the southern part of Tamil Nadu. Okay, so that's on this part. So if you give me 5 more minutes, I'll finish the last topic of the nuclear of the radioactive pollution, which is not related to radioactive pollution, but a radiation pollution, a topic which is gaining traction of late. If you have any idea, guys, which movie brought the theme as radiation pollution? Any idea? Of birds getting dead because of a cell phone tower. It tries to protect the bird and it becomes the villain eventually. This is a huge clue. Someone would have seen the movie, no? So this was this movie called 2.0. Have you heard of this movie? Rajnikant is the hero as always, and Akshay Kumar is the villain in this. So he's the guy who tries to save birds, and he's against putting up these mobile towers in his area. And yeah, Robo 2.0. So he's against putting these cell phone towers in this area, and eventually commits suicide on the tower and all that. So that was the first mainstream movie which talked about the impact of mobile towers on birds. Okay, Now, what is happening globally? The first thing is, and here understanding of electromagnetic spectrum becomes useful because you will see whether it is bad, if so, how much bad is it. So we are talking of cell phone towers in this range, which is actually less than the visible light to that extent. But the problem is, if it is one cell phone for one human being, the power is less. But what we are talking is cell phone tower, where it has the emitter, which is very, very powerful. The emitter is very, very powerful and it sends it in all directions. Now, we as human beings, we don't sit close to the emitter. Am I right? But who can go closest to the emitter? The birds. Therefore, it's not a coincidence that with the increase in the number of mobile towers in the cities have lost one very important bird. And this is not just in India, this is across the world. Surprisingly, you may have seen yourself, this gentleman, he has reduced drastically. And then I realized, yeah, it's correct. It's been a while I have seen a sparrow in Chennai, near my house. My house used to have a lot of, have a, not in the core Chennai, it's slightly outer, so we used to have different kinds of birds. Then I realized, yeah, in the last 10, 15 years, I'm not seeing that much of a sparrow. And a study was done in UK, and in UK also they found that the number of sparrows in London had decreased by 45% in 30 years. So that's huge. Now, why is it that the birds, or what are all the impacts? Why is the population of sparrows coming down? The population of sparrows is coming down because people have done some research, and roughly the results are along these lines. One is decrease in the reproductive ability. So the reproductive ability gets decreased, obviously, the propagation of population is not going to happen. And on top of it, even imagine if they are able to reproduce, the embryos are not able to survive. Yeah. And imagine the bird is born, a new bird is born. It is born with a reduced immunity. The first reproductive ability is reduced. If they reach the stage of embryo, then embryos are very unstable. If the bird is born, if it is hatched from the egg, then that bird has reduced immunity, which means it is susceptible to a lot of infection. On top of it all, suppose the bird had survived that also. The bird had survived that. It impairs the navigational ability of migratory birds. Navigational ability. Have you ever wondered how is it that the Siberian crane, it does not have a GPS, it does not have a mobile phone with that, you are sure about it, it does not know the exact coordinates of various cities, but how is it able to safely fly from Russia to India? Yeah? Because the head of many of the avian species, the bird species, they have a navigator. They have what is called as a inbuilt navigator. Inbuilt navigator. So it is their GPS. So one example is Siberian crane, which travels a long distance. There is another example called as Amur falcon. You must have heard of Amur falcon because it comes to this part of India, so roughly Nagaland area. Yeah, primarily Nagaland. It comes to Nagaland. And unfortunately, many of these Amur falcons are also killed because they are eaten there. So Amur falcons come there and look at the path that they take. So this, you see the three colors, blue, green, and red. So these three colors were actually geotags. Means the three Amur falcons were caught and GPS was attached to their body. And this is the actual tracking of their movement. It's so beautiful. They have come here and they have also traced almost exactly the same path. Okay. Now imagine Nagaland, maybe not so many mobile towers are there, let's say. So they are come to the Bay of Bengal, not so many towers. Somewhere here, let's say they meet a city. Let's say approximately this is Vizag, Visakhapatnam. It has a lot of mobile towers, let's say. Now, the bird thinks that it is going in this direction, but what if it goes in this direction? End of story. Yeah, it will keep on going Indian Ocean. It will become colder and colder. It will not be able to find the land. It will not be able to find anything to eat, and it will be dead. So that is the simple way in which the bird uses its navigational capability. Now, why are birds more prone? One factor is because birds are the ones which can travel at the height of the mobile tower, number one. And number two, birds also have a larger surface area of the body with respect to the weight. So there is something called as a surface area to weight ratio. They have a larger surface area to weight. And because of small size, the fluid, the brain or the fluid, whatever there in the head, it gets heated up faster. It gets heated up faster, which results in the disorientation of the bird. The bird is not dead, but its brain is gone. Okay, and it flies in the wrong direction and does not survive because it's in a completely wrong path. But however, it is important that all these are studies which are still in progress, because whenever you talk of mobile phone impact on birds, try to end the answer with this. Because I did a lot of research, the evidence is not yet conclusive. It is moving in that direction, but it is not yet conclusive. So much so that when this Robo 2.0 had come, the Cellular Operators Association of India had written to the Ministry of Communication, Department of Telecom, asking them to restrain the screening of this movie or to issue a warning saying that let them not make a mainstream movie which focuses on unsubstantiated facts. At least that's what they feel, that the fact is not substantiated. So that's the end of today's class. I think I have already taken quite a lot of time.